So thank you for the invitation to speak here at this conference. We're really happy to be here. The Chesapeake Bay program is looking ahead, imagining the future of a 64,000 square mile watershed for its 18 million residents. We're looking at what's working, what more is needed, and how we will go about it. What an awesome opportunity this partnership has, and what a responsibility. That's what Anna and I are here to talk with you about today. If we can change the pages. Oh, would you touch? All right, there we go. Which one? So we were called, the partnership was called to do this evaluation and forward-looking planning for the Chesapeake Bay Partnership by the Executive Council. So a quick overview, in case you're not aware of the Chesapeake Bay program, established in the Clean Water Act, Section 117, and also by voluntary agreement across 7 jurisdictions, EPA representing federal agencies, and the Chesapeake Bay Commission. So as stated, I'm the director of the Chesapeake Bay Program Office at EPA, and Anna is executive director of that commission. So our bosses are signatory to this voluntary agreement, as are the 7 jurisdictions. And this is led by the governors, the mayor of DC, the administrator of EPA, and the chair of the Chesapeake Bay Commission. And they form the Executive Council, the Chesapeake Executive Council. Under that Executive Council is a principal staff committee, which are secretaries, political leads, or someone who's selected by those executives at the Chesapeake Bay Executive Council. So there's the principal staff committee, and under this principal staff committee is a management board, and those are management officials from all of those entities, plus goal team chairs, advisory committees, and more of the federal agencies that are part of the overall agreement. So that management board is what I chair and what several of them are part of, and we oversee the day-to-day process and work of the Chesapeake Bay Partnership. So that's just to give you a kind of sense. We were charged, the partnership or program was charged by the Chesapeake Executive Council to look ahead, to look at what in the current agreement will be accomplished by where most of the deadlines, or the majority of deadlines, are in the current agreement. And those deadlines are 2025, important deadlines anyway. And then look beyond that. And so we nicknamed this the Beyond 25 effort, and that's what you see. What is Beyond 2025? So the Executive Council in 2022 charged the program with looking at 1, how are we doing towards reaching those goals, and 2, what's the future? And they asked us for looking beyond 25 to consider 2 aspects. The agreement that we have is the 2014 Chesapeake Watershed Agreement, and beyond its status, where should it go into the future? What is the recommendation? And the partnership, how is it structured? How is it working? How can we bolster? So the management board that I mentioned set up a steering committee to look at beyond 2025. And the steering committee represents each of the signatories, advisory committees to the partnership, another scientific committee, STAR group, goal team chairs or goal teams at least, who have been appointed people to review, and 2 non-governmental organizations representing NGOs. So we have 29 people on the steering committee who are representatives, and we have 29 alternates for when they can't make it. And this group has been meeting since, I think, a year. I think we started in June, and we have been meeting on a monthly basis. And those meetings can be anywhere from 2 days, or 6 hours, or sometimes shortened to 4 hours. So we've been putting a considerable amount of work into the steering committee. And to share what we've done so far, first of all, we needed to decide among the 29 representatives, which is a lot of people to come together on one key purpose or one product. So we had to determine the scope and breadth of what would be undertaken and how we were going to complete that work. In doing that, we realized there were several topics that needed to be deeply considered before we could really step forward on contracting something. And we started with a long list and honed that down to 5 key topics, which I'll share with you in the next slide. And then we also needed to look at the partnership. So this pursuit, that first, like looking at topics, looking at the agreement, that's focusing on the agreement. And then the second part is how do we assess the partnership? So my office engaged a contractor to conduct a study and review and read source material, look at documents, and talk with people to make recommendations for the partnership. And so that has been, I would say it's been completed, although we still have just a draft on that work that's been done. And then we're also, of course, drafting the recommendations from the steering committee to send through that system management board, PSC, and eventually make its way to the executive council. This is all due December of this year, as far as the recommendations of the path forward. So those 5 topics are listed here. These were the 5 key topics that we came up with from a list of at least 15 and decided to really focus on these. And I really want to mention these because the work that went into really considering these topics was beyond my expectation. Different members of the steering committee volunteered to lead these different groups and set out to find other experts. We knew that the 29 people working hard did not represent all the expertise and knowledge and experience that exists across the watershed. And they sent out in the most magnificent way to get input from more than 1,000 people who ultimately provided input on these topics. And then worked to hone down key findings that were shared in the 2-day symposium in February in Harrisburg at the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, who very kindly offered us space to have this intense 2-day meeting on what have you heard and how will that help us make recommendations. And then the second day was really the steering committee saying, what do we do with all of this and how do we move forward? So that's on the agreement. On the partnership I mentioned with the contract. So what we've gathered so far from the study that's been shared in draft are these points here. And I'm just going to let you kind of take a chance to read those. I'm not going to try and read them all to you. We heard a lot. We received this interim draft in April and have spent some time both virtually as well as in-person meetings as a steering committee, kind of teasing through what do these mean to us? What do we do about this? And here are some considerations as we think about how do we take on some of those things, the complex program, the connection between management board and goal team chairs, and how we operate on a daily basis, and that whole set of findings, how do we address these? And here are some considerations that we're proposing to consider, right? We're still in that drafting stage. So addressing the complexity of the partnership, and how do we do that? What does that mean? I think everyone agrees with it, as long as it's not my part, it's the complex part, right? So how do we take that on? The increased need for outreach, communications, and engagement, which we also heard from those small groups that met and reported back. Enhancing the interaction between the management board and the goal teams. How do we work together on a daily basis? Integrating social science in a bigger way is already existent. We know that, but how do we do that in a bigger way? And then we have a strategy review system that continuously looks at the outcomes and goals that were set before us. And if we're implementing those, how it's going, what's needed to support it in a bigger way.
All right, so I'm going to step in here to talk about how are we weaving all of these things that we've collected together. So we have, findings from those topical small groups. We have a report from that contractor on our partnership. How does this all come together into a steering committee report with recommendations for the program moving forward? So this kind of outlines the process and the players, right? So the steering committee, which was formed, they kind of sent down some questions to those evaluators, the small groups and ERG, that independent contractor. Those 2 evaluators have sent us back source material. So we have findings, 1-pagers from each of those small groups, and then we have the evaluation report from the contractor. And it's our job as the steering committee to take that information back, that source material back, and to turn that into a report, to synthesize it, to find where's the common ground amongst all of the partnership when it comes to those things, because we know we surfaced some ideas that not everyone is comfortable with. So it's our job to kind of figure out where those sore points are, where those touch points are, and identify a path forward that is truthful to what we've learned, but also realistic about where the partnership is most comfortable going forward, knowing the tasks that we all want to meet together. With that source material, we're going to put together a report, which I'll give you an outline of in a second. That report will go out for public input, hopefully July and August. We'll take that input that we receive, we'll revise our report, finalize it, and then it will be up to the management board and principal staff committee, those policy advisors, for the folks at the top of the FAE program to figure out what we do with it, right? What action are we going to take based on the recommendations that the steering committee has surfaced? And all of that needs to reach our executive council by December of this year, to be on the timeline that they set for us back in 2022. So this is the outline of the report that we are proposing to put together. The page numbers are going to change slightly. We aimed to be very short and sweet, but as you all probably know, it's hard to say really complicated things in 2 words. So the first part of our report, we lovingly call it the bottom line up front, but it is the critical path forward. It is what we want the executive council and their top advisors to read and to kind of digest earliest and upfront. It's our recommendation, particularly when it comes to the future of the agreement and the future of our partnership, and kind of the vision of how we move forward as a partnership. After that bottom line up front, we'll have a synthesized and analyzed summary of all of those materials and recommendations and findings and considerations that we've gathered, and what we think that means for the partnership. We're going to separate it into 3 topics, which largely follow the mission of the program: science, restoration and conservation, and partnership. And then after those 2 sections, we'll have all of the source material that we gathered. So you can find where we sourced these ideas from, and dive a little bit deeper about the background of that idea. And it was also a commitment to not lose any of the good ideas that we gathered during this process. We know a lot of people work really hard to put those ideas on the table. We're not losing them, we're moving them forward, even as we have to be realistic about what we have capacity to do in the next few years. So what is the steering committee, bottom line, what is the steering committee potentially recommending moving forward? When it comes to the agreement, we're suggesting that the 2014 watershed agreement should be affirmed. We should continue working on it, but amended to acknowledge that 10 years have passed since we adopted it, and things have changed. The conditions that we're working under have changed, the learnings that we have, the understanding that we have has changed, the expectations on us have changed. And so we should make sure that the watershed agreement is ready to meet those changes and continue to guide us moving forward. So why amendment? Well, one, we're making progress under this agreement. It hasn't failed us. We have done great work under it, even if we haven't met all of the targets that we set for ourselves. So we should acknowledge that this agreement is guiding us towards making progress. We're not pressing pause at this really critical moment for the partnership. There are a lot of resources that have been put together based on a lot of political will and commitment. And we have a short amount of time to use those resources, right? They are time-bound resources. So we have to tell the whole partnership, we're not pressing pause in this moment, even as we update and optimize our work. We're still moving forward with the plans we have, even as we make space for innovation. Amendments could help close the gap between where we are and where we want to be. When we looked across those source materials that we gathered, there are some discrete places where an amendment or an update to the agreement would help us. And so we should take the time to talk through those and see if it's worth pulling those into the agreement. And then finally, the watershed agreement was built for change. When it was drafted, the drafters put in the text exactly how it can be updated in the future. They knew that this one needed to adapt. Adaptive management is so important to our partnership, and so the watershed agreement can adapt too. And so we should follow what those drafters very smartly put into the agreement and allow the agreement to adapt to help us be more effective with each passing year. Some of the things that we think should probably most be looked at are the outcomes, the 31 time-bound targets across our goals as a watershed. Many of those outcomes are on course. 2 are uncertain. 11 will not be met by 2025 when their target date is set. And so we need to make sure that these outcomes, these time-bound targets, are giving us the proper guidance as a partnership to make progress. And so kind of looking at each of those outcomes and making sure that it's doing its job and providing that guidance would be time well spent as a partnership. So a little bit about what we think the time frame might be for all of this change coming. So by not this executive council meeting, but next year. So give the partnership a year to work through this. Make sure that we can look through the agreement. Full conservation, you'll see conservation is underlined. So if you look at the tagline of the EPA Chesapeake Bay program, it says science restoration partnership. But what we've learned is conservation is so important. It's not just restoration, it's conservation of what we have, because it would be very hard to recover that once lost. So make sure that we're doing enough to pull conservation into the work we do. Maintain that focus on the core of the program, clean water, the living resources, habitats, landscapes, and people. Make sure that the agreement speaks to all those, and reconfirm our commitment to meeting all of the goals that we put into that agreement. And starting, this coming year and however long it takes, review those outcomes, determine what changes are needed to some of them to give us that guidance moving forward, and weave language in that really acknowledges the emerging challenges that we are facing as we try to meet those targets, because the challenges continue to grow. And so we should be very clear about where those challenges are complicating our work and how we're going to meet those challenges moving forward. So to review the timeline of where we are now and where we want to be by December, we are furiously trying to put this report together right now. We are doing iterative drafting with the steering committee. They are on the hook every Tuesday of this month to be reviewing something or sending us their comments back. But it is our goal to put a draft report out for public input July 1st for a full 60 days of review, which will require the steering committee to be comfortable putting it out by the end of this month. We will take the feedback. We'll be looking at it as it comes in, because we're going to have 1 month, September, to make revisions based on the feedback we receive. In October, our final report will go to the management board and the principal staff committee for their review and determination of what steps to take in response to that report. And in December, hopefully we've teed everything up so that our executive council can take action based on the recommendations they've received to put the partnership on a good path forward. Taking a breath. We've talked a lot about what we're doing as co-chairs of this effort, but just a second to talk to you about who I am and who the commission is if you're unfamiliar with us. We are a tri-state legislative body. We were established in the 1980s by the General Assemblies of Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Maryland. And our job is to be a legislative voice within all of the partnership work. A lot of the players in this space are executive branch members or executives. We are the legislative voice because the legislature plays an important part in the authorization and appropriation process of getting this work done. So we help those legislatures, the 3 that we are part of, evaluate issues of common concern and look for policy solutions. I like to think we have a great relationship with the science community because we try to do policy based in the latest science, where we rely on you all to know where the innovation is coming in and how we can open the door to pulling it into the work. We also coordinate policy advocacy to Congress. So we know we have needs of our federal partners. We try to be a voice of relaying those needs to the Hill so that our congressional delegation understands what's needed to get the work done, to support our jurisdictions and all of the partners in this work in getting us closer. And as Martha said, the commission is a signatory of the agreement. Our chair signs it along with all of the governors, mayor of DC, and the administrator of the EPA. So we are an active participant in all of the meetings. We are a voice at the table, and we take that very seriously, which is why I spent so much of my first year on the job committed to figuring out what the path forward is for the partnership.
And so to talk a little bit about the Chesapeake Bay Program Office, as I had mentioned before, it's a 41-year-old program that we have now, and EPA in the Clean Water Act, Section 117, was called to, and mandated, directed to, lead the partnership in the sense that we're there to support the executive council. We receive appropriations from Congress, and we fund the scientific and programmatic work through our coordination with states, non-governmental organizations, and other entities. So just always try to remember to thank Congress for all the support that this program has gotten through our agency and through other agencies and other means. And we receive an appropriation now of $92 million a year. Plus, this program was considered a priority for infrastructure, so part of the infrastructure, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021 included the Chesapeake Bay program. For 5 years, we received an extra $50 million. And that money goes out, it doesn't say in EPA, it goes out to the partnership to fund the priorities and the needs, to do as much as possible and really lean in on accomplishing what we have set before us as much as possible by 2025, although important to note that this agreement that we have, the 2014 Chesapeake Watershed Agreement, does not sunset. It is guiding for us, and as Anna said, our recommendations will most likely be, we're still in the drafting stage, but we're headed towards, we recommend we still work with this agreement. It supports us and it moves us forward and we can amend. So in my office, it's unique to EPA, where our office is in Annapolis. It's not in Philadelphia. It is part of Region 3, which is headquartered in Philadelphia, and it's not in DC, where EPA is headquartered. We're in Annapolis. I have 30 EPA employees in my office and 115 total employees, which means we have 30 EPA and the others are federal agency staff and grantees and contractors. So even within our office, we are a partnership. We're led by a director, and I'm the new director as of January. So as I started, in order to bring these kind of the whole group together, no matter who we're representing, excuse me, we're there for the Chesapeake Bay Partnership and the program. So I developed and then got input on and created a vision for our office that binds us together. No matter who we work for, this is what we work towards. And these are kind of on the left-hand side, the key points of that vision. And then established goals, and I'm going to quickly talk about the 4 goals that I've established for our office to do the best job possible to support this partnership where it is now. And I have them in a certain order because I can remember without looking at ABCs. So we achieved the possible. We're looking at that 2014 agreement and seeing what do we need to do, what can we do, what can we accomplish in a bigger way by 2025 or by whatever the goals and outcomes set in that agreement. What more can we do and how can we more intensively do that? That we bolster the partnership. Our job is to really support this whole partnership. And so how can we do that? We've learned from this contract, there's been an assessment, and we constantly reach out and find ways to make sure we're interacting and supporting as we can. I have a responsibility to continue excellent stewardship of our human resources and our financial resources. Responsible for $150 million a year right now. It's a huge responsibility, and we need to make sure that we're doing everything super well, that we're targeting investments and making the best things possible. And then strategizing for the future, and that's what we've talked about today, looking beyond 2025. So I wanted to also just throw out some ideas, and these are not research questions, take one and do it, so much as food for thought. And I want to thank Gary Shimkin, whoever you are really proud of, for really, I think, putting most of these together. So because this is a research symposium, I wanted to share with you ideas that we, within our program office, are thinking about, kind of throwing out there, maybe will lead to other questions, and it might spur interest in this group. So on shallow, I'm not going to read all of these, but we'll leave the presentation for you as well. So shallow waters, that's something that the Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee put forward in their comprehensive evaluation of system response report about a year ago, a little more than a year ago. And it really does identify the need to target shallow waters. We were really focusing on shallow tidal waters, but we look at the waters where people live and where maybe there's the best bang for the buck for cleaning up in those spaces. So given that as a focus, what are some research questions that you might consider or that might start conversations during this conference and their futures? And so there's some questions there. Climate change, obviously, the impacts are already obvious to anybody. I hear it all the time just talking with people at social gatherings that aren't scientists working in the Chesapeake Bay program. We see, I live in Alexandria, right on the waterfront, we see inundation every week now from increased, as the tidal, the Potomac River is a tidal river, and the at high tide after rain, we will have a flood. So we see that, and I think each of you sees that. So what are some questions around climate change? And then in that Reaching 25 report that was given to the Executive Council last year for assessing where we are, and the slide that Anna shared about the outcomes attained and not attained, we identified to the Executive Council wetlands and forest buffers are really important to invest in. We're way off the mark. We need to do more. They're so important. So questions around that. And then social science that was brought up, and how do we better incorporate and integrate social science into the work we do. So these are just questions to have chats during the breaks on. They're not research requests that might spur on some good conversations as you look to your future and your role in what you want to do as scientists and as researchers, and how you might be able to provide and to contribute. So with that, that's kind of our whole presentation. I wanted to follow up with a couple of things and then give it to Anna to close us out. Number one, I just wanted to remember to thank all the steering committee members and their alternates and all the people who were super involved in this massive virtual brainstorming, which our new technology post-COVID gives us such an ability and such a sense of capability to reach out to more than we ever could for an exercise like this. The amount of work that those chairs of those small group topical discussions did to contribute to the steering committee's thought and ultimately the recommendation going forward has been massive. And so thank you, anyone in this room who is part of that, or anyone who's part of that. It's been tremendous, and thanks for all the work that people have done. And then ultimately, thanks to you for being here, for caring, for being dedicated and engaged, and for being brilliant and looking ahead and for contributing. This is what the future of the Chesapeake Bay needs, and so thank you for being here for that.
Pretty much summed it up. So I'll just say thank you for giving us this time, and looking forward to any questions you may have.
Questions? Oh, here we go. Lou.
Organization for the Chesapeake Bay program is such a challenge to not agree partnership implementers to tackle the non-point source. We look at the core activities of naturally the climate change, water resources, social sciences. Sounds like many of those could be oriented toward that. Is that right? And how do we see this moving toward further implementation or more focus, including that?
I'll start by saying, when you see the report, I think you'll find probably in that synthesized section, part 2 of the report, some ideas that have bubbled up on just those topics of what can we do to get a better handle on non-point source? How can we get better engagement from people in that space, because so much of it is dependent on voluntary action? How can we be better about targeting? I think everyone, the jurisdictions, everyone knows that resources have been pretty bountiful recently, but the forecast in the future is not for that to continue necessarily. So there will be a need to really target and focus. And so there are going to be some ideas in the report on places where we can continue that conversation. But I will caution that we are just on the cusp of those conversations. So a lot of what the report does is point to some really weighty discussion that's going to happen in what we call phase 2 of this work. So there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of proposals for those conversations, but there's not a lot of concrete outcomes on like how those conversations are going to end, because we know that the science, the policy, the resources all have to align before everyone feels comfortable kind of turning the ship and moving in that direction. So just one note of yes and caution.
So I just want to add to that, those research questions that I offered didn't include non-point sources, so that's something we all can add. It's really important. The CSER report that I mentioned, the excellent review of the CSER report in 3 pages, which published in Literature Magazine with reading, they all talk about non-point sources as well and the importance of those within our office. So remember there was the reaching 25 and where are we off target? The items that were highlighted to the Executive Council last year were forest buffers, wetlands, and non-point sources, or water quality, but really looking at non-point sources of pollution. So we are creating a strategy to bring to the management board on non-point sources. Lee McDonald and in the back has started to draft that and work with our water division and work with other partners to create this and then share it and get input on it and look at how can we tackle in a better way the non-point source question because it's huge and it's an absolute need to be successful in this program.
We have time for some more questions.
I'm Larry Safer with Unseasoned Staff. First of all, and Mark, I just wanted to thank you for all the amazing work you guys are doing. It's a huge credit for this. It's been a privilege to be on many people. You mentioned sort of peripherally phase 1 and phase 2, but you haven't really defined the way we're thinking about it. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. So I can repeat the question. So I referred to phase 1 and phase 2, but we haven't actually defined it in the presentation, and I think that's an important takeaway that we can change for the next presentation. So we knew going into this conversation that we had the privilege of leading that we could not answer all of these questions in 1 year or a little over a year. So we kind of, in our minds and in the steering committee's minds, we split this work into 2. Phase 1 was a scoping exercise. So what do we need to discuss as a partnership to put us on the best path forward? And that's what's in the report. But phase 2 is actually having those deeper discussions. With the 29 of us in the room, we knew we didn't have all the expertise to dig deep into all of these topics, but to at least surface them. So we need to engage the experts in phase 2 to actually come to conclusions on some of these big questions that we posed. So phase 1 was scoping and this report. Phase 2 is what we do with the report, the conversations and discussions that have to happen to suggest more discrete changes to whoever needs to kind of unlock that change. There will be different people that can make each of those decisions. So we have to figure out who's the person that makes that decision, prepare that change, and then present it to them in phase 2.
I just wanted to add, so Dr. Smith is the chair of the Scientific Technical Advisory Committee and also recently participated in the EPA Mid-Atlantic Region Summit. And he made the best statement, and it's been my model, kind of my guiding quote now. So I really like this place. I really care about what happens here in talking about the Chesapeake Bay watershed.
All right, we still have time for some more questions.
So many questions on this, but it's an amazing process, so I'd love to know what's a bit surprises, but let me ask this question. So I've looked at all the recommendations, right? And it's funny that a scoping exercise, the devil is really in a lot of the details. And so what's your feeling about, as there's the chance that stuff gets left to the side going from phase 1 to phase 2. And how do you know that something, because the devil is in the details and you haven't gone into the details, how are you making those decisions about what gets to go from phase 1 to phase 2? Especially when then you're sort of giving it to the management board and the PSC, to be a little bit of what's going from phase 1 to phase 2. So, how do you ensure that it's visionary enough that something really important didn't get left to the side?
You can start this.
I'm going to start this one just to change it up and let her kind of clean it up afterwards. So it's a great question. I think online partnerships are really messy. I think Anne and I could have sat down on our own and written something up in a month and handed it in, but it wouldn't be representative of this partnership, this watershed, and all the people and all the expertise in this room, let alone outside, outside of Annapolis, even just so much work is dedicated to this over so many, many years. So how how do we get our arms around all of that? And in some sense, it's impossible to do. I think that having that bottom line up front when we try to send something forward to the executive council, knowing that at that level, at a governor, a mayor, an administrator, chair level, they're going to focus on that big visionary picture. So we need to be able to represent in fewer words the big picture. But as Anna mentioned, we're providing access to all the source material and all the work of the small groups on those topics. And the various reports, we will have them in hyperlink text, the season report, the rising temperatures report, the forest buffer and wetlands workshop reports, the recent staff report on ecosystem services, all of that, so that we have access to all those sources and that anybody can go back and look at those, see the fuller recommendations from the smaller groups and see the bigger detail, depending on how much you want to read. And I think that's one way to do it.
Yeah, I think that question has been at the forefront of our minds from the very beginning of this process. And we have encouraged everyone to really put up the small tweaks and the big visionary ideas, just because this is the moment to get them out there and give them space and hopefully for them to catch fire and inspire. But it's the nature of the partnership that our decision makers are the ones who kind of unlock the door to the next part of this. And so I think we feel the weight as co-chairs of making sure they understand the importance of the ideas that have come together in the steering committee report, the sheer amount of work that's been done to ground those ideas in really quality reports and findings. But yes, that's always the risk that the capacity, resources, time, everything's going to focus our work more and more in each step. So we're doing our best to make sure that we give those ideas as much space as we can to lead the partnership. But we know that we have to get everyone on board with everything we do.
So let me ask my follow-up question, which is what is the best pleasant surprise out of this messy process?
I will say that we're over 40 years into the formal partnership, and for agreements in, and that can come with a lot of baggage of people who said, I've put ideas forward before and they haven't been picked up, and the partnership isn't learning. But we didn't get that. We got a little skepticism, but we got a lot of people willing to put their best ideas forward because they believe that the partnership can actually and wants to learn and adapt. And so I was pleasantly surprised that 40 years in, we still have people that are really committed to this work and really want to try to make a difference and get us closer to our commitments.
So I agree with that. I think leading the steering committee, it was just started about a year ago, a group of people who represent diverse interests. We had 27 members at the start. We changed that to 29. We added 2 NGO representatives. And I would say we had 29 representatives and about 55 ideas. And how to form and storm a new group like that with a time limited, strict time limit on it, that is so important and such an awesome opportunity, and to do it right and to work well together. That was scary at the start. In the first few meetings, we put so much work into it, and I just have to call out Doug Bell, who's back there, and Lucinda Tower, and Greg Ronco, and others in my office who supported us through planning for these meetings, and put so much time into it. It was always like, are you ready? But in the last couple of meetings, as we come together, we really formed this partnership where we're not all saying the same thing. We definitely have still different set of opinions, and we're looking for a balance, but we're real partners in this. And I think that's been a really positive thing about this steering committee.
Great question for online. What is the avenue for engaging watermen in the Bay program?
It's a really good question. I know that our regional administrator, Adam Ortiz, himself has found that as a priority and has sought ways to reach out to watermen and big figure out how we can engage better, and he certainly asked me to help follow up with that. So definitely on our, I don't call it to-do list, but on the list of needs that we need to make sure that we're doing a better job of. And sometimes it's figuring out how do you go about, do I go hang out at St. Michael's and then they come in with their cat child here and ask them what they want? So it's figuring out how do we engage with the Waterman, and what's the best venue and what works for people. It's just kind of like what Ashley Spivey was sharing today about tribes, and go to the people and listen and be patient. I think some of what was shared this morning is so useful as well for people who are engaging on a daily basis on their economic needs and their jobs and what the venue means to them. So really important, and I don't think we have it at perfection yet, but it's definitely on our priority list.
I'll say the other component of that is we recognize that the Chesapeake Bay Program Partnership is a network of networks. So it's the responsibility of all of the partners, the jurisdictions, to know the perspectives of their constituents. And so really, one of the most important things is for each state, Maryland, Virginia, for them to have that deep connection with their watermen, their constituents, and be taking those viewpoints into consideration when we get to the management decisions that the Bay program hopes to support with the science and the data that the states need to make those decisions.
All right, let's thank Martha and Janet.